The Intermountain West Contractors Advantage. Quality, speed, value for your money, and use code RADIO1000 to get $1,000 off a roof replacement now. Visit IWCroofing.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
We are expecting more afternoon thunderstorms through the week with highs in the 70s, overnight lows each night in the upper 50s. Right now, it's mostly cloudy, 74 degrees at KSL News Radio. 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com, your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Late last week, former President Donald Trump was indicted by the Department of Justice on criminal charges in connection with the classified documents found at his Mar-a-Lago home. The federal indictment has been unsealed with the evidence and charges against the former president clearly spelled out. And as always in these kinds of cases, innocent until proven guilty, the devil is always in the details. And yet there's some interesting things that we're not talking about that we should be talking about beyond the headlines. Nearly half of Americans in a recent ABC Ipsos poll say that the indictment is politically motivated, and the Department of Justice is deliberately targeting a political opponent of the current president, Joe Biden. But beyond the politics, the big question for me today is about trust. What does this indictment do to public trust in our institutions, trust in the Oval Office, trust in our allies abroad, and trust in one another? So for the next half hour, we're going to look at the indictment, how the Biden administration is navigating all of this, including the decline of trust in government institutions, why presidential candidates on both sides are swooping in to either defend or condemn the former president. So beyond the headlines, let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Again, regardless of how you feel about the former president, the indictment, of course, is the indictment. There are 37 counts in there. And you can debate all of that in terms of what it means, what it does, what will happen next. And we'll cover all of those things, of course. But we want to get to the beyond the headline component to all of this. And that is coming back to this issue of trust. It is one of the most important things I think we have in our society. I think it is one of the things that has allowed our constitutional republic to remain strong for almost 250 years. And the loss of that kind of trust, especially in our institutions, is one that we all should be worried about, regardless of the personalities or the politicians or the politics that are at stake. As I mentioned, almost half of Americans in a new poll said that they believe that the federal indictment is politically motivated. So that's a big challenge right there. When individuals and citizens feel like the government can target them or can spy on them or lie on them, targeting and those kinds of things, that's obviously going to erode and undermine trust. Now, 47% of respondents in this is an ABC poll, this was released on Sunday, say that the charges against the president need to be evaluated in the light of being politically motivated. And there are some partisan components to that, for sure. Most Republicans, 80%, say the charges are politically motivated. Only 16% of the Democrats said the same. And the flip of that, of course, is that 71% of Democrats say the charges are not rooted in politics. And, of course, only 9% of Republicans feel that way as well. So as we look at all of that, the question then becomes, so what does this mean, and how do we have a different kind of conversation about that? One of the things I think we have to think again about is the yeah, but conversation. The yeah, but conversation is where people will say, well, the former president had this and this and this. Yeah, but what about President Biden and his documents? Or yeah, but what about Hillary Clinton in that case? Or yeah, but what about Mike Pence when he was out of office? And the one thing I wish we would get rid of in our conversations is the yeah, but. And it doesn't just apply to indictments of former presidents. It applies to a whole host of things. We have so dumbed down and lowered the bar and standard in so many areas because of the yeah, but. Yeah, but so-and-so did this. Yeah, but the other side did that. Yeah, but those evil, awful, horribles did this. And it's all about the yeah, but. Yeah, but never leads you to a better conversation. especially when it comes to the rule of law. You can't have a yeah, but conversation with the rule of law. The rule of law is the rule of law. And the key is to be willing to go through that process to ensure that we get that rule of law applied properly. So there's lots of back and forth, and the yeah, but conversations are everywhere. Whether it was what the president did with his or when he was willing to surrender the documents that he had at Mar-a-Lago, whether it was how quickly the current president, Joe Biden, or former Vice President Mike Pence cooperated with authorities to return documents that they had in their possession. That's an interesting part of it. The real complicated conversation is the yeah, but conversation about the Hillary Clinton case and what was on the servers, what emails were done, how that was taken care of. And so those are all things. And we have to make sure that we're not going down this same path of trying to apply something to something that is different. Similarities, yes. Vast differences, also yes. But we have to be willing to have that conversation. In other words, what we have to do is we have to act as citizens as if we were the jurors in the case. And we should not just go to the headlines, nor should we go to the partisan talking points from either side of the aisle. We should go to the facts of the case. What happened? What are the facts? What do we know for sure? How is it carried out? And then you can make a decision. But if all we do is hunker down in our own little social media bubbles, if we only just go to the partisan talking points, we can never have a more important conversation, which to me is the conversation about trust. And we'll talk about this coming up in our next segment in terms of what people on both sides of the aisle are saying to either defend or condemn the former president. Some of it definitely appears to be politically motivated. Some of it is not wanting to offend maybe potential voters that they might need to win a nomination. Some just want to ignore everything altogether for fear that if we have the conversation, then we'll shine a light on a whole lot of other things that need to be corrected or fixed in government. So as we look at how we have the conversation, again, you can't do that in a tweet or Truth Social. You can't do it in a 30-second soundbite. You have to be willing to look at the evidence. Because if we are going to restore trust in the institutions, that also requires us as citizens to look at the facts and to look at the merits and to make decisions for ourselves. But that takes a little bit of work. That takes a different kind of conversation. You have to dig just a little bit deeper. But until we're willing to have that part of the conversation, then what we're going to end up with is a lot more of these yeah, but conversations. And who appointed who, which lawyer or which judge sitting in which case or which courtroom has the most political motivations to do something. Meanwhile, our trust in our institutions of government, from Congress to the White House and executive branch to the judicial system and the courts, continue to be undermined in terms of the confidence and the trust that we have in them as citizens. And you've heard me say this before on this program, that the United States of America has been stress tested in some pretty extraordinary circumstances. World War, economic collapse, pandemic, January 6th. You can stack them all up. And in every one of those cases, the institutions held. But the thing that we've never really done in this country is stress tested it in the absence of trust. And not just in the institutions, but in ourselves. It used to be that if you asked a citizen of this country, do you trust your neighbor? For decades, that was an off-the-charts, absolutely 70, 80+% of Americans say, yes, of course I trust my neighbors. And now that number's down into the teens, below 20. Less than 20% of us say, oh, yeah, I trust my neighbor. Absent trust, if we lack trust, not just in the institutions, but if we lack the trust in our communities and with each other, then we have a whole different set of problems we're going to have to deal with in our constitutional republic. And so I want to make sure as we frame the week this week that we're framing it on the right things. Yes, there's going to be lots of images from helicopters showing motorcades going to and from airports, to and from courthouses and residences. And that's fine. These are big charges. This is a big indictment of a former president. It's also someone who's running for office. And so, yes, all of the questions can and will be asked as it relates to the politics, to the policy, to the principle and rule of law. And all of those questions should be considered. And we need to go past the headline and look at the issue of trust in our institutions and trust in each other. We'll continue the conversation when we come back.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. It may be summer, but the news isn't slowing down this year.
For Stewart to step down.
Construction of the West Davis corridor continues.
Warmest May ever.
Make KSL your go-to each morning this summer. Utah's Morning News with Tim and Amanda starts at 5. We talk through the biggest stories with Dave and Dejanovic at 9 and Boyd Matheson at 1. Then drive home with key news updates with Jeff Kaplan from 3 to 7. Your all-summer companion for news. KSL News Radio.
Our state's children face a serious threat from the vaping industry, but thanks to state leaders and the Utah Health Department, Utah established the strictest nicotine standards for vaping in the United States to protect our kids. However, the vaping industry sued, claiming their sales and profits are down. Now they're pushing the health department to hand control of vaping regulations to the federal government. We can't allow that to happen. The proposed change would automatically increase nicotine levels in vape pens and reintroduce fruity flavors that entice our kids back into Utah convenience stores. Visit StopKidsVaping.com today and make your voice heard. Utah should maintain state control, preserve our 3% nicotine limitations, and prevent vaping flavors from returning to Utah convenience stores. Together, we can secure a better future for our children. Join us at StopKidsVaping.com and tell the health department, protect our kids.
Paid for by Prosperous Utah Communities.
Register for breaking news updates by texting the word news to the Cypress Credit Union KSL text line at 57500.
It doesn't get any better than summer camping in Utah, and it doesn't get any bigger than the Utah Summer RV Palooza, presented by Bish's RV. Find select 2022 RVs at up to 20% below cost. All new brands like 26BH Go Play travel trailers for high quality and an undeniable value, starting at $19,995. Plus, get 90 days no payments OAC for all play and no pay till September, and enter to win a $30,000 travel trailer. 3 days only, June 8th through the 10th at the Layton Hills Mall. Sponsored by Bish's RV.
I guess it's human nature, Amanda, that no matter how much money we have in our savings account, it never seems like it's enough. And if you find yourself in that mode right now, let us direct you over to our friends at UCCU. They are wanting to help you supercharge your savings.
UCCU is offering high-rate savings options with yields up to 5.5%. All you do is go to UCCU.com and select a high-rate savings option to do just what you said, supercharge your savings.
You're going to get a much bigger return on your savings right now. It's a savings certificate, which means you make one deposit up front and your money grows over a fixed period of time. So you can have that grow over 5 years, but UCCU has created some very short-term savings certificates with high yields, short like 6 months, 9 months, or a year.
So you decide how long do you want to put that money. You deposit money, a one-time only deposit, and then you let it stay in. The longer it stays in there, the higher the interest rate you earn.
And if you need immediate access to your money, UCCU's Money Market will give you a high yield and anytime access.
UCCU, you're going to love where you bank.
Guys, did you know your testosterone affects everything in your system, including how you feel and perform every day? Right now, Revive Men's Health Salt Lake City will check your testosterone for free. Knowing your T levels is the first step in understanding if you have low T. Your testosterone level impacts your energy, libido, sleep, weight, hair loss, mood, and even ED. Maintaining an appropriate T level can change your whole life. Most men start to see changes in their hormone levels in their 30s. Experience and results matter. So what are you waiting for? Get your T levels checked today by local, experienced, and trusted Men's Health experts. They've helped thousands of men since 2011. They're so confident they can help you, they even guarantee it. Call Revive today and schedule your free testosterone test, free exam, and free consultation. Call Revive Men's Health at 801-263-7777. That's 801-263-7777. Or visit ReviveMen'sHealth.com.
A must-see Utah Symphony performance of Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens, in concert. The entire movie plays on the big screen while the Utah Symphony performs the score in sync with the film.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Becky Bruce. First, the Camas woman accused of killing her husband, then writing a grief book for her kids, will have to stay in jail for now. Her request for bail was denied. Second, Taylorsville police are in search of 2 suspects they say have cashed multiple stolen checks at Salt Lake and Utah County banks using stolen IDs. And third, former President Donald Trump is in Miami ahead of his scheduled arraignment on federal charges tomorrow. Right now, it's partly cloudy, 74 degrees in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
We're staying with the conversation as we talk about the indictment of former President Donald Trump. The arraignment, of course, is expected to take place about this time tomorrow. And, of course, we will cover that. It is an important and altering to so many things in terms of the presidency, in terms of national security, in terms of elections, and what is yet to come for the country. So we will monitor all of that. We'll watch for the headlines, but more importantly, we want to get past the headlines to those think again moments to really analyze what's going on beneath the surface and why does it matter to everyday Americans and everyday citizens? What does it do for our allies overseas and for security around the world? The responses, of course, have been varied and had been a wide range as you look at the indictment of the former president. One of the interesting things to me that I haven't quite figured all the way out yet is that there is one group of people that have been pretty consistent in calling into question the motivations of the indictment and have pointed out some of the flaws in it. We talked about the Yabut conversation previously. But the interesting thing is that the group is President Trump's political competitors. Now, often you would think in a scenario like this that you would have people vying for one position and only one person gets to be the nominee. And in past history, you would see an event like this where all of the other candidates would pounce on the one being charged in an effort to try to drive them out of the competition. And yet we've seen pretty consistently over the weekend that presidential nominees on the GOP side have been coming to the former president's defense, not always calling him by name, but definitely questioning the Department of Justice and the administration. And so we wanted to get into what they're actually saying, what that actually means, and are they likely to stay on this messaging strategy? And what will the president do as well? He also has a tricky needle to thread when it comes to dealing with a political opponent, someone that he has faced in the last election and one that he may face again. So let's start with South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. He gave his reaction to the indictment, explaining it this way.
What we see today across this nation under Joe Biden's leadership is a double standard. That double standard is both un-American and unacceptable. This case is a serious case with serious allegations. But in America, you're still innocent until proven guilty. And so what I'm going to focus on is making sure as President of the United States that I restore confidence and integrity in the Department of Justice so every single American can have confidence that they will be treated the same, no matter your color and no matter your partisan affiliation.
So interesting approach there from Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina, clearly an opponent of former President Trump, but he's talking about a double standard of justice. He's talking about that being unacceptable in this country. He then pivoted. He went to the seriousness of the allegations and the need for everyone to suspend judgment. Because in America, you're innocent until proven guilty. So that's an important piece of the program. And then, of course, he closed out by talking about how he would begin to work to restore confidence and integrity to the Department of Justice. Now, in North Carolina on Saturday, while attending a Republican convention there, former Vice President Mike Pence expressed his concern over the motivations behind the indictment by the Department of Justice.
It's important to remember in America, you are innocent until proven guilty. The former president, like every other American, is entitled to a presumption of innocence. Secondly, the American people have a right to know the basis of this decision. That's why yesterday morning, I think I was the first in the country to call on the Attorney General to unseal the indictment and release it to the American people. But today, I'm calling on the Attorney General to stand before the American people and explain why this was necessary in his words. Attorney General Merrick Garland, stop hiding behind the special counsel and stand before the American people and explain why this indictment went forward.
Okay, now, I actually found that kind of interesting. So again, everyone's kind of talking about the double standard. People are talking about presumption of innocence. Those are important principles. They're important principles to trust. And they're important whether you're a Democrat, or Republican, or anything in between. I thought the former vice president's call, first for the unsealing of the indictment, which did happen on Friday, and then for Merrick Garland to stand in front of the American people and lay out the case in his words, not just having what the special counsel said, which was probably the shortest press conference in history, only about 90 seconds of content. And saying, look, this is how we restore confidence in the process, in the system, would be for the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, to stand before the American people and at least give some framing for what has taken place and why. I think that's interesting. I don't think it's going to happen, but I think the former vice president calling on that is an interesting way to go at the trust conversation. Now, another candidate, of course, it was at the same convention in North Carolina over the weekend. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis defended the former president, though not by name, but also framed some things in kind of an interesting way.
I think there needs to be one standard of justice in this country. Let's enforce it on everybody and make sure we all know the rules. You can't have one faction of society weaponizing the power of the state against factions that it doesn't like. The weaponization of these agencies strikes at the heart of what it means to have a free society, and it's not just affecting people at the top, it's affecting people all throughout our country. What I can tell you is this: we need to have a president that's going to do something about that. You got to be willing to go in there on day one, and you got to be willing to spit nails.
All right, so some interesting words from Ron DeSantis. Again, standard of justice. Everyone gets an equal shot. I thought his most interesting component to that was this weaponization of power of the state against individuals or against opponents. And that is an important conversation to have. We've talked about some of the agency things in terms of places where agencies have a great ability to target, to go after citizens, and making sure that that's done in a way that's transparent. And that preserves the rule of law. I think those are super important pieces of it. Now, here was a really interesting piece of this. Again, one of the competitors of the former president, people you would expect would pounce on this issue to try to drive the former president out of the conversation, out of the competition and campaign. But yesterday on CNN's State of the Union, presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy didn't call out the former president, didn't call out the DOJ. He actually called out the media.
With due respect, I think it is shameful that I, as a competitor to President Trump in this race, have to ask questions that the media isn't asking. The job of the political media, if it has one job, is to hold the U.S. government accountable.
Yes, we know that.
And instead, we're doing the bidding. You're seeing the media doing the bidding of the U.S. government. No. Ask the question. Get to the bottom of what Biden told Garland and what Garland told Jack Smith. If the same shoe fit the other foot, you would not take their word at face value. Do not take their word now. Get to the bottom of it. Let's actually restore journalism in this country. That's what's actually missing, is getting to the truth.
So very passionate, obviously, from Vivek Ramaswamy, saying that, hey, I'm a competitor of Donald Trump in this race, and I'm the one having to ask the hard questions. And what he was really getting at, again, whether you agree with his positioning on it all or not, but he did ask an important question. And it doesn't just apply to the media. It applies to all of us. Are we getting to the truth? Are we asking the hard questions? Are we demanding the hard answers be said out loud? Are we making sure that the integrity of the institutions whether that's institution of government or institution of the media. Again, all of those things that fit so neatly into those first freedoms of this country. We have to get to those. We have to have that kind of conversation. Now, finally, real quickly, I want to get to former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson, who gave probably the most blunt and direct assessment of what has been laid out against former President Trump.
It's obviously a very solid indictment. The grand jury found probable cause for it. Now, I do think Jack Smith's going to have a challenging time making the case in court, not because the facts are weak, but simply because you're going after a former president, and you just have one juror that happens to be a Trump supporter or be of a different viewpoint, you're not going to be able to get a conviction. And so this is a challenging case for the government, and it'll be interesting to see how it proceeds forward.
So, as a former prosecutor, Asa Hutchinson, to kind of get it, he says this there's a lot in there, but it'll be a hard case to try because you have to get beyond a reasonable doubt. But to me, it all comes back to the conversation we've been having for the last half hour, and that is, can we get to the truth and restore trust in our institution? That's not political. That's the American piece. We'll be right back.
It's 1:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bonas. KSL's top story this hour, no bail for the woman from Camas accused of killing her husband. Corey Richins' defense attorneys cross-examined Summit County Detective Jeff O'Driscoll about the night that her husband Eric died after he consumed a fatal dose of fentanyl.
They searched the home that night knowing that he had a drink right before he went to bed, and made no note that they had recovered glasses, looked for glasses, anything along those lines, correct?
Not to my understanding.
Richins was visibly emotional at multiple times during the hearing. Taylorsville police looking for a couple of suspects who they say have cashed multiple stolen checks at banks in Salt Lake and Utah counties using stolen IDs. Police say the thefts have happened at Mountain America Credit Union, America First, and Zions Bank. If anyone has information on either of the suspects, Taylorsville police want to hear from you. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. Security is already tight outside the federal courthouse in Miami, where former President Trump will be arraigned on new charges tomorrow.
We know that the police have been hearing that the former president is calling his supporters to rally here at court. So far, though, there's no sign of any, and there really aren't extra security precautions up here right now. They've put some yellow crime tape behind me to block off an area in advance of tomorrow. But right now, court is operating business as usual.
That's ABC's Aaron Katursky in Miami. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average up 166 points on the day at this point, and NASDAQ up 182 right now. And those afternoon thunderstorms are coming back. That's next. KSL News Time, 1:32.
What do you need to hear in the morning to feel ready for the day?
Important news that happened overnight, the traffic you'll hit on the roads.
You'll be ready for your day with us.
Join Utah's Morning News 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
Imagine it's the last ride, but your symptoms of irritable bowel syndrome with constipation, or IBS-C, are taking you for a ride. What should you do? Keep managing your constipation with belly pain the same old way? Or try getting ahead of your symptoms by talking to your doctor about treating it with Linzess, linaclotide. Linzess is a prescription medicine that treats IBS-C in adults. It's not a laxative. It's a once-daily pill that helps you get ahead of your symptoms. It's proven to help you have more frequent and complete bowel movements and helps relieve overall abdominal symptoms, belly pain, discomfort, and bloating. These symptoms were studied in combination, not individually.
Do not give Linzess to children less than 2. It may harm them. Do not take Linzess if you have a bowel blockage. Get immediate help if you develop unusual or severe stomach pain, especially with bloody or black stools. The most common side effect is diarrhea, sometimes severe. If it's severe, stop taking Linzess and call your doctor right away. Other side effects include gas, stomach area pain, and swelling.
Imagine, what could relief from IBS-C mean for you? Talk to your doctor and say yes to Linzess. Learn more at linzess.com or call 1-800-LINZESS.
At
AimYourDigital.com will help you target the right audience, build your leads, and crush your quota. Take your business to the next level. Our digital marketing strategies help grow awareness of your product or service, all while building trust in your business. Our approach involves leveraging multiple tools and strategies to deliver exceptional results that are customized to your unique business needs. Don't wait to run out of sales leads. Keep your business growing. Get started with AimYourDigital.com today.
Did you know 96% of Americans lose an average of $111,000 in Social Security income? And it's because they claim their benefits at the wrong time. Don't lose $111,000 in Social Security income that's rightfully yours. Learn how you could wring every nickel out of your benefits on Retirement Solutions Radio this Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock, right here on KSL, News Radio 1027.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
We still have crews working to clear this crash in South Salt Lake, northbound I-15. It's after 33rd South, but before 2100 South on the right. And rain coming down and adding to the slowing on Highway 40, trying to get to the I-80 junction. Make Father's Day easy and get the best gift ever, a blanket or robe from Minky Couture. Shop online at minkycouture.com or any Minky store. Best gift ever, Minky Couture. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, we're expecting more afternoon thunderstorms through the week with highs in the 70s, overnight lows in the upper 50s. And right now, it's 73 degrees, and we're seeing storm clouds out there at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Well, we are very pleased to have joining us on the program today Jonathan Rauch, Senior Fellow in the Governance Studies Program at the Brookings Institution. He's author of 8 books, countless articles on public policy, culture, government, and a host of other things. But as you all know, I don't like to introduce people by their biography. I like to identify them by their principles. And one of the things that I always look to Jonathan for is his ability to really thread that needle in terms of government, culture, public policy, and principles. And I think it's Jonathan's ability to get to the principles of so many different things, such a wide range of topics that makes him a real treasure in the country and someone that I look to for good, rational, reasonable, but powerfully inspiring information and content. And Jonathan, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you, Boyd. With an introduction like that, I should quit while I'm ahead.
We're not going to let you off that easy. That's the other rule of this show. So,
it's all downhill from there.
Well, I know everyone is looking forward. You'll be part of the 2023 Religious Freedom Annual Review, which, of course, will be down at the BYU Conference Center, in conjunction with the Wheatley Institute, and just some important conversations there. And so let's start with what's coming up. This is on June the 15th. There at the BYU Conference Center, and you'll be a part of some really crucial discussions around challenges and opportunities for religious institutions. Give us a little bit of framing there from your perspective.
Well, my perspective is a bit unusual for a conference like this because I am an atheistic homosexual Jew, and so I am very much an outsider. But I am also someone who believes that our democracy does not function well if religion and secular politics don't have mutually supportive values. I'm not saying religion should be politicized or that politics should be deified, just the opposite. But I am saying that these two very different forces are both crucial to making the American experiment work, and the founders thought so too. So recently the work I've been doing is to try to understand how Christianity can get along better with democracy than it's doing right now.
And this is such important work, and I love the way you've framed that in terms of these two components, the religion and those institutions, and the politics and the governing and all of that, and those institutions. And just dig into that a little bit deeper for us, Jonathan, in terms of what is it that those two things need to be separated from, and what do they need to be united around?
Well, Well, I used to be, in my youth, much more of a kind of ACLU style secularist. I had nothing against religion. Of course, although I'm an atheist, I was never a militant atheist. But I really did believe in kind of the wall of separation between church and state. So the only thing that religion should ask of government is to leave it alone, and the only thing that government should ask of religion is really nothing. And I came to see over time that the problem there is that the political system, the Constitution, is not designed to give us our basic values in life. I mean, it's about politics. It's about how we compromise, how we legislate, how we come together as a polity. But as the founders said to whoever would listen, none of those processes work if people hate each other so much that they don't want to come together, or if people believe the other side is so dangerous that they don't want to compromise with them and, in fact, just want to defeat them and drive them out of the country. And more Americans were believing that, and unfortunately, more and more Protestant Christians, evangelicals, were believing that, getting swept up in the culture wars, being politicized, becoming the base of the MAGA movement. And then we also saw that seculars, in the progressive world, were increasingly saying, well, let's take away the tax breaks for religious organizations, and let's not give them any space at all to, for example, distinguish between gay marriage and straight marriage. And so that became a collision, and that's a dangerous collision for democracy, because democracy relies on supporting values coming out of our religious traditions. I'm not saying they're not separate. I'm not saying you have to believe in God to be democratic, but you do need to try to align those two forces better than they're aligned right now, when they're started to really pull apart.
Yeah, I think that's such a crucial part of the conversation. And as you were sharing that, Jonathan, I was thinking back to an interview I did with Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs from the UK just before he passed away. And he talked about that.
Yeah, great man.
Yeah, an amazing thinker and writer, and it ended up being one of his last interviews before he passed away. But he talked about this idea that the institutions of government are not, as you just said, not designed to deliver those values, that it could deliver a maximum of choice but a minimum of meaning, and that we had to go beyond just the politics, and we can't let the politics overtake the religion or the religion become centric in politics. And so as you look at how we have those conversations, I think this is something you do extraordinarily well, is get people into a space to have a different kind of conversation, both about our politics and about our religion.
Well, that's the hope. I'm so much of an outsider that I'll never be influential in these worlds, but I am heartened by the beginnings of movements from within the evangelical Protestant world to begin to say, hey, wait a minute. I mean, it's no good to have Christ-like values in your personal life and then be cruel, dominating, and just nasty in your political life. And so people are increasingly saying, wait, these values are all of a piece. We need to bring more Christian values into the way we do politics. I'm very encouraged to see the LDS Church is, I think, turning itself into a leader in that space. And I also hope that we can see, maybe even are seeing, the beginning of more awareness on the secular, not the extreme progressive left, not the radical people, but in more like the center left, the world of mainstream liberal Democrats, a better understanding that religion has got to be part of the equation of keeping this country healthy, that you can't replace it with Soul Cycle.
Yeah, that's such an important piece. I was thinking we had former Governor Mike Leavitt, former HHS secretary, and he was giving a speech about the economics of goodness, and actually had an interesting back and forth with some renowned economists about the economics of goodness. And one stood up and said, you're turning in this to a religious discussion. And then just as Governor Leavitt was trying to think of a comeback or how to respond, another economist stood up and similarly said, no, it's not about religion. I'm an atheist. This is about human behavior and the absolute predictability of consequences. That someone who is honest is going to get into less trouble than someone who cheats. Someone who's kind is going to have more friends than someone who's cruel. Societies that look out for each other are going to have less crime and more opportunity. an upward mobility than those that don't. And I think it is that economics of goodness that you're pointing to that often gets lost in the very polarized space that you just described.
Yes, and that's exactly right. There's now reams and reams of evidence from sociology and social sciences that participation in religious communities, not just belief, that doesn't do it, but participating, showing up, being part of those communities makes people psychologically and emotionally healthier. It makes them physically healthier. It leads to better outcomes in terms of the community and giving and less crime. And humans need to feel like we're participating in something transcendent, bigger than themselves. Now, I might be an exception. I've never believed in God. I've never felt a need to. I think I'm a person of at least medium character, even though I'm an atheist, and lots of secular people are wonderful people. Yeah. But for society as a whole, if you don't have these institutions that are able to transmit these values, create a sense of community, show up on your doorstep if something has gone wrong, then you get a lot of people who get isolated and a sense of meaninglessness and drift, and then they're easy prey for demagogues and outrage artists.
Yeah, that performative politics will always go down that path, and the grievance approach to it all, that division and isolation that just unravels and really frays the fabric of society. Jonathan Rauch is Senior Fellow in the Governance Studies Program at the Brookings Institution, author of numerous books. He is someone that you should read, that you should follow, who comes from a fascinating perspective and always enlightens me and always gives me a perspective that I hadn't quite thought about. And Jonathan, we appreciate you doing that today, and we look forward to having you in the state of Utah next week at the Wheatley Institute on Thursday, June the 15th for the 2023 Religious Freedom Annual Review. And I know you will cause people to think again about a whole host of things, and that's always our goal, is to get past the headlines and to get people to think again about something they think they might already know. And we really appreciate you carving out time for us.
Thank you, Boyd.
Great perspective from Jonathan Rauch. Religion, secular politics, crucial for democracy. You need to go back and listen to this on the podcast. It will cause you to think again and again and again. A great perspective from Jonathan Rauch. More Inside Sources coming up next.
Right on cue for summer.
OPEC plans to cut oil production.
Gas prices are headed up.
It could drive up prices for other goods.
Whether you're planning a staycation or a day trip, start your summer here. Get updates on traffic out of town, gas prices, and everything you need to know. Listen each day this summer, mornings and afternoons, to KSL News Radio.
Well, summertime's here, and you're probably looking around wondering about a few things. Might be some home repairs, remodeling, maybe a project you've been wanting to get done around the house, or maybe you've just been trying to get the financial house in order, looking at some debt consolidation, or maybe you're planning for that big family vacation. It is a great time to tap into the equity of your home, and Hercules Credit Union can help you do just that. All you have to do is mention you heard this ad on KSL, and you will get a home equity line of credit at 3.99% for the first 6 months. And that's important. Remember, as interest rates continue to go up, you want to lock that in. And with Hercules, again, there's no fees to go through this process to get your own home equity line of credit. You also get a Visa card that you can use anytime, anywhere, for any reason to access your equity and your money. You can always do that with Hercules Credit Union. Check out their locations. Of course, they're in Taylorsville, Harriman, Riverton, and Salt Lake City, or you can find our friends at Hercules Credit Union online at HerculesCU.com. That's HerculesCU.com.
Hi, this is Dan, the laptop man from PC Laptops. Are you suffering from excruciating headaches, anxiety, and insomnia? You may be suffering from CMS, Crappy Monitor Syndrome. That old computer screen from years ago could be the problem, exposing you to massive amounts of radiation frying your brain. At PC Laptops, we only carry screens that we've tested on our own eyeballs. Right now, purchase any PC Laptops desktop with an external monitor and get a free size upgrade. That's right. For example, if you buy a 22-inch monitor, you get an upgrade to 24 inches for no extra charge. Buy a 24, get an upgrade to a 27-inch monitor for free. We have brand new PC Laptops desktop computers starting from $11.99 or $29 a month, backed by a lifetime warranty. And to make it extra sweet, we're doing 0 interest for a year on approved credit. So run into any one of our PC Laptops locations right now or check us out at PCLaptops.com. That's PCLaptops.com. Because at PC Laptops, we love you.
If you've got a honey-do list with electrical, plumbing, heating, or air conditioning projects on it, Any Hour Services can help. Call Any Hour Services, electrical, plumbing, heating, and air. AnyHourServices.com.
With no fees or minimums and no overdraft fees, banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. Even easier than choosing Slash to be in your band.
Next up for lead guitar. You're in.
Cool. Yep, even easier than that. With no fees or minimums and no overdraft fees, is it even a decision? That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com/bank for details. Capital One N.A. member FDIC.
You trust us for news and information in your car. Now trust us at home. KSL News Radio is your window to the outside world, keeping you informed on the latest breaking news, weather, traffic, sports, and more. Listen on your Amazon Echo or Google Home device. Just say, Alexa, open KSL News Radio, or listen on the KSL News Radio app. Text the word app to 57500. KSL News Radio, Utah's all-day companion for news.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bonas. First, former President Trump is in Florida a day before he enters his plea at a Miami courthouse on that 37-count federal indictment. Second, Pennsylvania promising to make road work a 24/7 priority after a fire caused part of I-95 to collapse near Philadelphia. Third, the area near Bridal Veil Falls is still full of snow and ice. Utah County Sheriff's Office says too many people still trying to explore the area, and that poses safety concerns. Right now, 73 degrees, mostly cloudy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
There's a new urban city planning concept that's making some waves, not all of them good waves. It's called the 15-minute city. It's been implemented across Europe and cited as a climate solution for the United States. So we wanted to get behind the headlines of that and look at what does this kind of city look like and what could be the unintended consequences of that kind of policy here in the United States. Stephen Malenga is a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute and City Journal's senior editor, and he wrote about the intersection of urban economies, business communities, and good public policy. Stephen, welcome to the program.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So let's dive in. Give us the background and exactly what is the 15-minute city.
Well, probably the best way to describe it is it's a city made up of 15-minute neighborhoods. The whole idea, basically, is that every neighborhood now should be designed so that they all have the services you need within them. And you don't even have to go outside your neighborhood in order to find the basics of what you need. And this really came about during the pandemic when European cities and American cities, too, to a lesser degree, were actually restricting travel severely in some cases. And I mean, in some cities, you couldn't even be seen on the streets. And so the idea was, since public transportation wasn't working and stuff, there was this. People noticed that you had to go a ways, for some basic services. So this new idea is we want to design cities so that every neighborhood has everything you need within it. The problem with this idea is that requires a lot of micromanaging by government, to make sure, for instance, every neighborhood has all the retail services you need and so forth. I mean, what do you do if they don't, right? Right. So this is, but this concept is making inroads in Europe, and there have been protests as a result because governments have to, I guess you could say, to create this concept, you have to do certain things that not everybody agrees with, and it's become controversial in England and in France and other European cities. States, rather.
And it has been an interesting collection of those in opposition. Some saying, it's not far enough, and some saying it's too far, and it's socialism or it's micromanagement, as you said. I want to get beyond that because you raise, I think, a really important kind of unintended consequence in all of this that I think is really the heart of all of this. And that is if we were to go to such a 15-minute neighborhood planning concept with as much government as that would take, wouldn't it also end up being one more place of division, especially as it relates to the middle class and the poor?
Well, that is probably one of the biggest objections, and it's an objection that you hear from both people, I guess, who are more conservative, and by that I mean people who are not in favor of government micromanaging their neighborhoods and their cities. But you also hear that on the left from people who are socialists, because what they fear is the way neighborhoods are constituted, that means necessarily that the poor in particular will be further segregated from the rest of society. First of all, it's going to be very tough getting all the services in certain communities because, retailers will go where they think there's a big pot of gold for them. Those neighborhoods, you can rely on them having the services. But it's not so clear if you restrict movement around the city, in order to make the city greener, essentially. But if you restrict movement, who are you mostly restricting it for? Because which neighborhoods lack those services? And it's inevitably you're poor. So you also get the same kind of, you get a different kind of criticism on the left of this concept. But both the left and the right have their own kind of worries about this idea.
Yeah, and I do think that access to services is such an interesting component. We've seen it here in the U.S. and I think in even here in the state of Utah of just the homeless population being able to have access to services. And sometimes it's impossible to go get a driver's license because it's a 45-minute bus ride, 2 transfers, and it'd take you all day to get out there. But if you don't have that driver's license, you can't apply for the job. And being able to get some of those things centrally located, again, it does seem to be one more area that could disadvantage the poor and the struggling, obviously much more than the wealthy.
Well, yes, and there are, one of the things, for instance, that you raised, you've raised the issue of the homeless, and in many of the cities that are actively trying this, there's some smaller cities in Europe, you don't hear a lot about the homeless. These are not those cities that are facing that kind of a problem yet. That's a whole other level of issue.
Yeah.
That I think complicates things. Nonetheless, there have been several stories already in the United States where you have urbanists and journalists speculating which American cities would be right for this. Obviously, places like New York and San Francisco are mentioned. Chicago and Minneapolis are also mentioned. But those are also cities, San Francisco in particular, which has a tremendous social problem and a tremendous problem, with social disorder. And what would be the consequences of restricting movement around the city, in order, to keep people essentially in their own neighborhood? And that's, just that very concept, of course, makes people uneasy. So this is this is like one of those ideas that it's completely top down. Cities have over time, old cities, they evolve from the bottom up, neighborhood by neighborhood. This is more of that top down. Let's create a new city, and here's a great idea of how to do it. But there are people out there who, are actively trying it, and certainly in Europe.
Oh, and it's a fascinating thing to look at, and a great perspective there. I think the top down is always the big challenge. I think it would be difficult in a lot of cities that I know. I think that would be a tough one to navigate that and to allow a level of government to put all of those pieces into one place, and then whether those would even hold once there. And again, whether that creates more of a divide or bridges a divide between the wealthiest and those and everyone else is just an interesting thing to look at. Anything else you're watching as you see this play out, Stephen, that you're kind of keeping your eye on?
Well, one thing to keep in mind is you said, that this is a kind of difficult thing to do and it has all these problems. The problem is we saw essentially the kind of movement restrictions, mobility restrictions in the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, there's precedent for this. And the fact that the 15-minute city, which I don't think was originally thought of as a climate policy, the fact that it is now being linked to climate policy is, I think, the significant thing.
Yeah.
Because you look at some of these world organizations, and they are talking about very restrictive policies, like limiting the amount of meat that a society produces and can eat. You know, one of the top group of mayors, European mayors, who are promoting the 15-minute city, they also have a goal of reducing per capita consumption of meat in their cities by 2/3. So,
not happening at my house. I'm just telling you that.
yeah. So what happens is, like the pandemic and something like climate, people use that as a justification for these kinds of policies. And it's not unprecedented now because we've seen it in our lifetime.
Yeah.
In our immediate lifetime, we've seen it.
Great perspective, great insight. Stephen Malenga, Senior Fellow at the Manhattan Institute and City Journal's Senior Editor. Stephen, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you.
All right, that wraps up hour number 1 of Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. We're going to step aside for some top-of-the-hour news, but don't go anywhere. We got a big hour number 2 of Inside Sources coming up next. Stick around.
KSL FM Midvale, KSL Salt Lake City. Listen on the KSL News Radio app and in your car at 102.7 FM. KSL News Radio, your all-day companion for news.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour, no bail. That's the ruling handed down to an author from Camas accused of murdering her husband. KSL News Radio's Adam Small was in the courthouse today.
Corey Richens appeared anxious and on edge during the testimony today, which focused on the night her husband Eric was found dead, cell phone records, and her debts. She broke down a couple of times, once during testimony about how Eric began foaming from the mouth when first responders tried administering CPR. She's accused of buying and administering the lethal dose of fentanyl to her husband.
Richens will now remain in jail pending her trial for aggravated murder. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. City and state officials in Miami already preparing for tomorrow's court appearance by former President Trump. Police Chief Manny Morales says they're ready for this. He emphasizes they have both the resources and the manpower to ensure the city's safety.
Make no mistake about it, we're taking this event extremely serious. We know that there is a potential of things taking a turn for the worst, but that's not the Miami way.
And the former president has already arrived in southern Florida on his private jet to get ready for tomorrow's court appearance. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average down 190 points, or rather I should say up 190 points on the day so far, and the NASDAQ is up 202 points right now. And our KSL weather, those storms look likely this afternoon. That's next. KSL News Time 2:01.
We have enough people running around Broadcast House at 4 in the morning to field a football team.
Producers, reporters, the traffic team, and us.
This is Tim and Amanda.
Join us each morning from 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
Hey, Derek Overstreet here from the New Millennium Group, financial advisors in Utah. You know, I've been helping people retire in the state of Utah for the last 20 years. The way we do that is we actually find out what is important to you. We create a step-by-step plan that takes into consideration your income, your debt, whether you want money from real estate, stock market, annuities, life insurance, whatever. If you want to deal with professionals, people that are fiduciaries and have a legal responsibility and obligation to do what's in your best interest, give my team a call at 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370. Or go to my website, utahsfinancialplanner.com. If you'd like to retire 3 to 5 years before you thought it was possible, give my team a call right now. 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370.
The Utah Division of Emergency Management says make a plan. Identify a meeting place outside your home in case of fire and outside your neighborhood in case you're separated in a disaster. Get a kit. Besides your disaster kit, have at least a 2-week supply of food and water stored at home. Be informed. Check your earthquake and flood insurance for your home. And finally, get involved. Remember, when family members take action toward preparedness, you will all be ready. Visit beready.utah.gov and get details. That's beready.utah.gov.
Don't be worried, be ready. KSL News Radio is partnering with Be Ready Utah to provide the plans your family needs for an emergency, the tools and supplies to keep on hand, and the knowledge on how to keep a cool head. It's Be Ready Utah. Listen for Be Ready tips and tools each Tuesday with Dave Dujanovic. Plus, find the latest preparation info at beready.utah.gov. That's beready.utah.gov. Be Ready Utah with KSL News Radio.
Mom and Dad used to argue about everything, especially about Dad's drinking. My family went from totally crazy to quiet, calm, and even peaceful when Mom started going to Al-Anon family groups. I wanted a better relationship with Dad, so I asked Mom if she would take me to her Al-Anon meetings or to Alateen. I'm sure glad I did. Is someone's drinking troubling you? You might be surprised at what you can learn in an Al-Anon or Alateen family group from people just like you. Call 1-888-4-ALANON or go to alanon.org.
Question: what will you find on all over-the-counter or OTC medicine packages to help you choose the right drug and use it safely? The answer: the Drug Facts label. This label lists the medicine's active ingredients and purpose, how much to take, and warnings you should know before using it. Remember, even OTC medicines you buy without a prescription can cause side effects you don't want. So follow the information listed on the Drug Facts label. For more information, visit fda.gov/drug facts label. A message from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration.
At aimyourdigital.com, we'll help you target the right audience, build your leads, and crush your quota. Take your business to the next level. Our digital marketing strategies help grow awareness of your product or service, all while building trust in your business. Our approach involves leveraging multiple tools and strategies to deliver exceptional results that are customized to your unique business needs. Don't wait to run out of sales leads. Keep your business growing. Get started with aimyourdigital.com today.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
Some wet roads along the Wasatch Front. The final cleanup of a crash northbound I-15 after 33rd South on the right, and an accident reported Foothill Drive, 1300 South. This is the place, Heritage Park, your family place for summer fun. Learn Utah history while mining for gold, exploring trails, shopping, and eating at the Huntsman Grill. Visit thisistheplace.org. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather. We'll see some more of these thunderstorms this afternoon, and they will continue through much of this week. Right now, it's 72 degrees and mostly cloudy at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
It's shameful that somebody or somebodies somehow think it's okay to put this kind of information in the public bloodstream. Now, you're just doing your jobs. I get that. You got to ask tough questions, and people are going to come to you with all kinds of sensitive information. We'll do the best we can to provide you a steer and to let you know what the vulnerabilities are. Obviously, you and your bosses make the decision about whether you're going to report on it. But I'm comfortable that we were as forthcoming as we should have been and could have been in the moment, and remain that way right now.
That was John Kirby during the White House press briefing, pushing back on some of the things that had been reported about China establishing a base in Cuba to be able to spy on the United States. Of course, last week there was a lot of pushback from the Biden administration to kind of shut that down. Over the weekend, it became pretty apparent that China had already established a spy base in Cuba, probably dating back at least until 2019. And so the question beyond the headlines is, why are we just hearing about this? Did Congress know about this? Had they heard about it? And more importantly, what are the cascading effects the administration might have, and what are the communication implications as it relates to China? Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Let's get past just the headline components to all of that, and we turn to Jamil Jaffer, the founder and executive director of the National Security Institute at the Antonin Scalia Law School at George Mason University, and he previously served as a chief counsel and senior advisor on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He gets this like very few people. He's been in the room where a lot of these conversations happen, and joins us on the program. Great piece in Political. Jamil, welcome back to the program.
Boyd, thanks for having me.
All right, so let's take a look at kind of the lay of the land. First, there was rumors about China doing something on Cuba. Then, actually, it's already there, and maybe it was a few years ago. What do we actually know?
Right. So the administration basically said, "Look, we think this report is inaccurate." Now, they weren't clear what they meant by inaccurate. Right? They may have meant inaccurate in that this is a new base, right, which is what the Wall Street Journal reporting was, or it's going to be established. But they ultimately came out 2 days later and said, well, actually, this base has already been there. It's been there since 2019. It's actually a Trump administration's fault, essentially blaming it on the prior administration and saying essentially that we're taking actions to push back on it.
Okay, and so as you start digging into that, of course, that raises all kinds of questions. And one of the things we've been talking about on the show today is just this whole idea of trust in our institutions. You've been a part of those conversations relating to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So what is the sense in terms of what has this conversation been, if it does go back to 2019, and why are we just starting to hear some of this now?
Well, at times we might keep quiet and keep classified information about a foreign spy location, even if it's 90 miles off the U.S. coast. And so what you might think here is that the prior administration, this administration, kept it quiet. But the real question is, in the context of what's going on today in the world, with the Chinese putting more pressure on Taiwan, we've seen them harassing U.S. planes over international waters. We've seen them harassing U.S. ships transiting Taiwan Strait. At the same time, we've seen the president talking about a thaw in Taiwan relations, things getting better potentially with the Chinese relations with China. And yet, here we are. We have yet another example of how China is getting aggressive, and we're not doing enough to push back.
Yeah, and so as you look at that from a communication strategy standpoint, it does seem very conflicted and conflicting as we talk about this thaw and this desire to have more communication there. And then we've got spy balloons, spy locations, all the other economic pressures. We've got the diplomatic efforts that China is leaning into as well. What does all of this do in terms of where we actually are in the relationship with China?
Well, that's a great question, Boyd. I mean, I think the real challenge here is that on one hand, you have the Biden administration seeking what they call both competition and cooperation with China, right? Particularly on things like climate change and the like. They see an opportunity here. At the same time, we see what they're doing in Taiwan. We see their aggressiveness in establishing the spy station. We see what they're doing with these ships and these airplanes over international waters. And it makes you wonder, can we really solely compete and collaborate and cooperate with China, or is it really going to come to conflict? And that seems like where we're headed. The Biden administration doesn't seem prepared to accept that at this point.
Yeah, and so give us some perspective from your experience in terms of Congress's role in all of this. When should Congress be in the loop? When do we need to keep, as you said, when do we need to take these kinds of secrets and keep them secret? When do we have Congress involved in that process? What does that look like?
Well, boy, look, Congress should be involved all throughout this process, right? Both the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and the House Intelligence Committee and the Senate Intelligence Committee, all of those members of the committees have clearances, all their staff have clearances. There's no reason why they shouldn't be fully in the loop about what's going on with China, including the establishment of the spy base. And what appears clear is that at least the committees weren't fully briefed on the administration's position, and they don't understand. You've seen leadership from these committees talking about how they don't understand how the administration can't get their story straight. Is the report inaccurate, or is it accurate? And we've known about it for years.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge there that kind of undermines the trust element. Is first it was a denial, and then it was well, maybe, and then it was, well, yeah, but it was there a long time ago. not our job. So you kind of get back to that. And again, I don't care if people love the current administration or the past administration or anything in between. To me, it's just a communication strategy in terms of we have to have confidence that we have a process and that we have a set of disciplines around all of this. So as you're watching this, Jamil, what are you watching for? What's the next piece of this puzzle, or what's the next shoe to drop?
Boy, sorry, I missed the question there.
Oh, sorry, we lost you for a second. So as you look at this in terms of what comes next, what is it that you're watching for as it relates to kind of where we are in this relationship with China? And again, especially when it comes to things like intelligence, what are you watching for? What should we be watching for?
I think the key question is, are the Chinese going to take steps to really lower the temperature? So we've seen the president send the CIA director, Bill Burns, on a secret mission to China. We've seen him send his national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, to Vienna to meet with the Chinese foreign minister, right? We know that Antony Blinken keeps trying to go to China, and he keeps having to cancel his trip because these things keep happening. The question is, will the Chinese demonstrate their willingness to work with the United States and try to do something to lower the temperature by not harassing our planes, not harassing our ships, and maybe even disestablishing the space in Cuba? If they did, that would be a good sign. I worry, though, that the administration has not been tough enough to get that kind of an outcome right now.
Yeah, that toughness factor, I think, is something that has to be baked into that equation to get to a better result for sure. Jamil Jaffer, founder and executive director of the National Security Institute at the Antonin Scalia Law School at George Mason University. As we mentioned, he previously served as chief counsel and senior advisor on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, a very important one there in the Senate for sure. Jamil, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Boyd.
All right, really important, this relationship that is either frozen or thawed or lukewarm or ice cold, Arctic frost. We seem to be all over the map when it comes to China, but these are crucial pieces to our national security conversation. And we're going to stay with the conversation. And coming up, we'll talk about the Chinese spy base in Cuba and how it's part of China's more aggressive global rivalry with the United States. Stay with us. Much more to come on Inside Sources.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. Summer 2023 will be one to remember.
Mike Pence and Chris Christie set to enter the race.
Governor Cox is actively looking for trade away from China.
Brace for higher gas prices. It's a summer to camp out on KSL. Tim and Amanda have breaking news, mornings 5 to 9. David Dujanovic and Boyd Matheson talk about the biggest stories during the day. And you get updates and Jeff Kaplan's Minute of News from 3 to 7 on the drive home. The summer of 2023 will be on KSL News Radio.
It doesn't get any better than summer camping in Utah, and it doesn't get any bigger than the Utah Summer RV Palooza, presented by Bish's RV. Find select 2022 RVs at up to 20% below cost. All new brands like 26BH Go Play travel trailers for high quality and an undeniable value, starting at $19,995. Plus, get 90 days no payments OAC for all play and no pay till September, and enter to win a $30,000 travel trailer. 3 days only, June 8th through the 10th at the Layton Hills Mall. Sponsored by Bish's RV.
Incredible savings on all Bernina machines at Dave's Bernina in Provo and St. George.
Don't miss our summer sale.
It's time to get a new Bernina machine and see the difference.
Save big on select Bernina machines. $500 off the Bernina 5 Series and L8 Series Surgers. Take $700 off the 7 Series. $800 off the Bernina 8 models, and save $1,000 on Bernina long arm quilting machines.
Featuring 60 months, no interest on certain models.
But this financing offer is only good through June 12th.
The new Bernina 770QE Plus Cave machine is in stock and specially priced.
Come in and check out the special edition 475 Cave machine. It is discounted along with the Bernina 435.
Amazing bargains on previously owned machines while they last that come with warranties.
Starting at $399.
Hurry in to Dave's Bernina, 691 East St. George Boulevard and 2017 North 550 West in Provo. Follow us on Facebook.
Our state's children face a serious threat from the vaping industry. But thanks to state leaders and the Utah Health Department, Utah established the strictest nicotine standards for vaping in the United States to protect our kids. However, the vaping industry sued, claiming their sales and profits are down. Now they're pushing the health department to hand control of vaping regulations to the federal government. We can't allow that to happen. The proposed change would automatically increase nicotine levels in vape pens and and reintroduce fruity flavors that entice our kids back into Utah convenience stores. Visit StopKidsVaping.com today and make your voice heard. Utah should maintain state control, preserve our 3% nicotine limitations, and prevent vaping flavors from returning to Utah convenience stores. Together, we can secure a better future for our children. Join us at StopKidsVaping.com and tell the health department, protect our kids.
Paid for by Prosperous Utah Communities.
In this market, you'll find Fisher Investments is different than other money managers.
Different how? Aren't we all just looking for the hottest stocks?
Nope. We use diversified strategies to position our clients' portfolios for their long-term goals.
You don't just provide cookie-cutter portfolios?
No. We tailor our clients' portfolios to their goals and needs.
But you still sell investments that generate high commissions for you, right?
No, we don't sell commission-based products. We're a fiduciary, the highest standard of care for a financial advisor. It means we're obligated to act in our client's best interest.
So when do you make more money? Only when your clients make more money?
Yep, we have one transparent management fee structured so we do better when our clients do better.
Sounds like you really look out for your clients.
We do, because our priority is helping them achieve a comfortable retirement. That might be why most of our clients come from other money managers. Visit FisherInvestments.com to find out why investors like you switch to us. Fisher Investments. Clearly different money management.
Investments in securities involve the risk of loss.
Tim and Amanda.
If this is the first time you've ever joined us, can we just say welcome, welcome? I hope you come back and see us again. Tim and I have been doing this for a long time, and we love what we do. But the best part of what we do always and will always be connecting with you.
How many times do we say people don't understand how much information and really love we get from that side of the radio?
Yes.
They thank us for giving it to them, but we get it back so many times.
Wake up with Utah's Morning News with Tim and Amanda, 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Palmas. First, the woman accused of murdering her husband with an overdose of fentanyl will not be getting out of jail on bail. Second, never mind the danger, people are still getting too close to the avalanche debris at Bridal Veil Falls. Third, Miami's police chief promises the city will be ready for tomorrow's court appearance by former President Trump. Right now, 72 degrees, mostly cloudy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Get deeper insights on the news from Inside Sources.
Really thrilled to have back on the program Ian Johnson, of course, a senior fellow for China Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations. And Ian, welcome back to the show. And as we look at some of the things we've learned about this spy base in Cuba for China, what does that really tell us? What do we really know about this?
Well, I think it's another sign that China is really serious about projecting its power around the world, and it's trying to do essentially what we do, which is to look inside potentially hostile countries and figure out what they're doing. I think China has felt for a long time that it's sort of been on the receiving end of this, and for the past 3 years they've been not exactly turning the tables, but trying in some way to get a little bit of their own information on what we're doing.
Yeah, and so as we look at those spy operations, and obviously countries have been spying on each other forever and ever. That always seems to be part of the national strategy. Right. But now that, as you mentioned, I love the way you framed it in terms of China projecting power. What does that tell us in terms of their positioning and what they're actually going to be angling for as this moves forward?
You know, I think China is not satisfied with the status quo in the world. They don't like the world that was sort of built after World War II, that was largely built by the United States and a lot of other largely Western countries, but not only Western countries. And this is a world that's based on certain principles of, respect for human rights, and also an idea that what goes on inside other countries' borders are not only its business. That we learned the hard way from Nazi Germany, for example, that when a country starts going off the rails internally, it can affect all of us. And so after World War II, I think we sort of set up a system where we tried to set up some standards and say certain countries shouldn't act in certain ways. What goes on inside your borders isn't just your own business. It affects all of us. And China's trying to fundamentally reverse that and say, what we do is our business, stay away from us. And this is a completely different vision of the world, I think, than the one we live in right now.
Yeah, that is fascinating stuff. And One of the things that I think is interesting as we look at the kind of go forward, it's partly looking back. In fact, that this is not a new thing. It appears the spy station in Cuba dates back to 2019 or before. And so give me a perspective, one, in terms of that, and then what does this do? The president has been talking about this thaw in the relationships. The timing of this seems a little challenging. You've got another round of attempted thawing with Secretary of State Blinken. How does that all play out?
Yeah, and I think that both sides kind of would like relations to be a little more calm and not to continually have these hiccups all the time. But I think this just shows that no matter what the intentions are on either side, two countries are, at the end of the day, at loggerheads over how this world should be shaped and what the world should look like. And these things keep coming up. And they're not just sort of, whoops, a small mistake here and a small mistake there. I think they reflect deeper underlying tensions between the two countries. Not that the United States and China have to go to war or something like that, but that fundamentally these two countries have different visions for the future. And I think this is just another example of that. So it is going to be difficult for Blinken to go to China. I think he's going to still probably end up going there, but it's going to look optically, it's going to look a little bad, and it's not going to be so easy for the administration.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a very tricky needle to thread, and it has been an interesting thing in a very divided Congress that has brought a few people together. We know Mark Warner, Democrat from Virginia, Marco Rubio, Republican from Florida, part of that Senate Intelligence Committee. They kind of united around some statements as this news was coming out. And it seemed to have some real across the parties kind of thing in terms of, hey, we do need to galvanize around China. Does that create an opportunity within the Congress to make some positive movement there?
Yeah, I think it is one of the few areas where both parties can agree on something, which is that we're concerned about China. And in that sense, it's not really new. But I think that the challenge is going to be to find some way to live with China, realizing that it is a country that is probably the only country in the world that can present a full-fledged challenge to the United States. I mean, Russia's got nuclear weapons and stuff like that, but ultimately it's a pretty hollow country with a bad economy and so on. I mean, China's the only country that has the full gamut of things that you expect from a superpower. Aircraft carriers, they're building more, space program, and now spying capabilities right on the doorstep of the United States. We sort of have to figure a way, like we did in the Cold War with the Soviet Union, to live with this country, not to accept it, not to like it, but to sort of find some way to live with it without getting into a full-fledged shooting war.
Yeah, and tell us just a little bit in terms of kind of the communication strategy from the administration. It's easy to look backwards or to point fingers or place blame on the previous administration or whatever it might be. But more importantly, what does this mean in terms of what the administration will do with a sort of an emboldened China? How do we counter that and, as you said, create this space where we can at least exist and not end up in a war?
Yeah, I think they've been trying to figure out a way to go forward with China. There's been a remarkable continuity between the Trump and Biden administrations in their China policies. For example, on trade, the tariffs have not been lifted, the tariffs that the Trump administration put into place and things like that. I think what probably the Biden administration is thinking is we need to get this trip to China over with pretty soon. We need to have a meeting or two, maybe even between Biden and Xi sometime this year before we get into the election campaign next year. Because starting, in about 9 months or less, we're going to be full blown into the election campaign. And I don't think anything's really going to happen then. So I think they want to keep things stable. They don't want to give the Republicans too many talking points by appearing to kowtow to China or looking too soft on China in the run-up to the election, but they do want to have some kind of a dialogue and discussion with them. So they're probably trying to figure out a way to get all this stuff done now as quickly as possible before Election Day in, whatever it is, 16 months from now.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to dig in just a little bit more before I let you go, Ian, in terms of this kind of emboldened China. Obviously, the spying components, whether it's balloons or bases in Cuba, the economics in terms of their strength there, their military positioning, as you were mentioning earlier, And then also this diplomatic front that they've clearly been leaning into in the Middle East and other places, along with, roads and belts and all of those things in developing countries. What is it that we should be watching in terms of what appears to me to be a very emboldened China, sort of on the march? How does the U.S. make sure that we're not functioning from a position of weakness? We're kind of on our back foot.
Yeah, we have to keep engaging other parts of the world, too. I mean, I think that's one of the lessons that we see in Africa, where we tend to look at Africa as a series of crises and countries that are, it's a place where there's only war and famine and things like that. China looks at a place like Africa as a land of opportunity with 1 billion people, and some of the countries in Africa have very strong economies, and we need to be there just as present as they are. We need to have our diplomats on the ground talking to people there and encouraging our companies to invest there, just like the Chinese encourage their companies, so that it isn't so there is a choice. And I think that, we have a good story to tell. Unlike, say, China in many regards, the United States does stand up for human rights and things like that. That doesn't go down always well with some authoritarian states in the world. But I think that if we are engaged in these parts of the world and talking to them and investing there and creating jobs and business and so on and so forth, then we can counter China. I think it's mainly when we're absent, when we leave a vacuum, then China comes in there.
I think that's so important, that absence or, that functioning from a position of weakness rather than a position of strength, reacting to situations rather than seeing those opportunities. Great analysis, great perspective, as always. Ian Johnson, Senior Fellow for China Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations. Ian, thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
So we spent the last 30 minutes going through looking at what's happening with China. They're clearly on the march, functioning from a position of strength. They're leaning in with great boldness across everything from military to economics to spying to diplomatic efforts around the world. Where's the United States? Are we creating a void, an absence, or an opportunity for China to step forward? We're going to step aside for some bottom-of-the-hour news, but coming up, we're going to shift our focus and go to Ukraine. The long-talked-about, much-anticipated Ukrainian counteroffensive is underway against Russian occupation. Where does it go? What does it mean? We'll talk about that coming up next. Stick around.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bonas. KSL's top story this hour: a judge in Summit County denied bail for Corey Richens after a hearing this morning. She's the woman from Camas who's accused of poisoning her husband. And after he died, she wrote a children's book about dealing with grief. Testimony at the hearing focused on her alleged purchase of fentanyl and her multiple debts. People are still climbing around the avalanche debris near Bridal Veil Falls in Provo Canyon. The Utah County Sheriff's Office says this is really unsafe. KSL News Radio's Amy Kobabe has details.
The Sheriff's Office clear up some of the debris last week. That's because there's still over 10 feet of snow and ice left over on the road after a massive avalanche tore through the area this winter. Sergeant Cameron Roden says most people aren't aware of how that snow and ice is full of cracks and caverns that could break at any moment.
Seeing the demonstration or the result of the power of nature is an interesting thing to see, but we would really like people to do it from a distance.
Roden.
And that's, of course, Sergeant Spencer Cannon with Utah County Sheriff's Office, not Cameron Roden from the Highway Patrol. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. Inside the Harold Washington Library in Chicago Monday afternoon, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker signed a bill that would prevent book bans in that state.
The United States has gone through periods of protests against works by authors like Charles Darwin and Mark Twain and J.D. Salinger.
Illinois is the first state to make bans on library books illegal. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average ending the trading day up 189 points. The S&P 500 up 40 points and the NASDAQ up 202. And our KSL weather, another thunderstorm is expected this afternoon wherever you are. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:32.
Start your days with knowledgeable, friendly voices telling you about the latest news and weather out there.
Hi, this is Tim Hughes and Amanda Dixon.
In the business of waking you up each morning from 5 to 9.
On KSL News Radio.
At Intermountain Primary Children's Hospital, we made a bold promise to build the nation's model health system for children. Join us in realizing our vision for the future of pediatric care. So together, we can expand primary children's impact and ensure every child has access to the right care at the right place at the right time. For a century, Primary Children's has kept the child first and always. Help us continue to do so for the next 100 years. To get involved, visit primarypromise.org.
You could throw your flip-flop at a bug.
Ew, a bug, get it!
But the chances of actually hitting it
Over there!
are statistically
It's still alive.
unlikely. Good thing nature's got your back. Stem bug killers combine powerful active ingredients found in plants, like lemongrass and geraniol, and scientifically engineer them into effective bug-fighting formulas, safe for use as directed around people, pets, and throughout the home. Stem, rooted in nature, optimized by science.
At the United States Postal Service, we're reinventing our network to help keep your business moving. With new shipping options to deliver better value, greater flexibility to conveniently reach your customers, more confident shipping with new informed delivery features, and new electric vehicles for a cleaner, brighter future. Fast, reliable, perfectly orchestrated. The United States Postal Service, delivering for America. Learn more at USPS.com/moving forward.
Any Hour Services can help unclog any drain in your house, whether you have a backup, a clog, or a slow drain you want fixed. Call Any Hour Services or visit anyhourservices.com.
Most of us like to be out in the sun. That's why sunscreen and other safety measures are key to protecting your skin from aging and cancer. The FDA recommends using a sunscreen with an SPF of 15 or higher. Also, look for broad spectrum on the label. That means both harmful ultraviolet A and B rays are blocked. Remember, SPF plus broad spectrum equal healthy fun in the sun. Visit www.fda.gov/sunscreen for more information. A message from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
A KSL traffic trooper reporting flashing red lights at Pioneer Crossing and Redwood Road in Saratoga Springs, creating big backups. And we still have some leftover heavy and slow traffic from the crash in South Salt Lake on northbound I-15 after 33rd South to the right. The Utah Symphony's Deer Valley Music Festival in Park City features Ben Folds, Leanne Rimes, the Beach Boys, and more, June 30th through August 4th in Park City at DeerValleyMusicFestival.org. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Our KSL weather, more thunderstorms this afternoon, and we're expecting that to be a daily pattern for the next several days this week. Right now, 70 degrees and mostly cloudy at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com, your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson.
On Utah's home for elevated conversation.
Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
After a very long period of buildup and a lot of speculation, the Ukrainian counteroffensive against Russia is underway. The stakes in this latest military campaign could not be higher for Ukrainian leadership as well as the Ukrainian people. So what do we need to know about this latest development in the war and the counteroffensive? And how will this campaign, how will the outcome of it influence the future for Ukraine? Really pleased to have back on the program Ishan Tharoor, columnist on the foreign desk of the Washington Post. He's the author of today's Worldview newsletter and column. Great place to look for some super insight. And Ishan, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back.
Well, so we've had a lot of speculation, a lot of waiting and wondering when this vaunted counteroffensive was going to begin. It appears that it is underway. What do we know right now? What's the lay of the land?
Well, the fog of war is quite thick. The Ukrainians have been very coy about sharing any details. But we know that at least in the past week, this counteroffensive got underway. They've deployed a number of new, essentially kind of Western-backed, Western-created armored brigades with tanks and infantry fighting vehicles and so forth. And they are plowing through, or at least trying to get through Russian lines on a number of different fronts, east, southeast, and south Ukraine. What they are going up against is quite tough. The Russians have fortified a lot of these positions. It's going to be a long, attritional slugfest. And no one is talking about seeing progress in days, even weeks. It's more of a kind of this is the whole summer is going to be shaped by what happens now and the battles to come. And this is so we're measuring the offensive and in the counteroffensive over a very long period of time. So in terms of actually seeing what's happening, we know that the Ukrainians have recaptured 5 villages as of this morning in southeast Ukraine on the borders of Zaporizhia province. And that's a significant move, but it isn't necessarily a sign of any kind of lightning advance. And we'll be getting these kind of bits and bobs of details of advances here, setbacks there throughout the weeks to come. But the main goal, and I think what's important for your listeners to understand, is the Ukrainians are trying very desperately to punch through the Russian line and essentially cut the Russian occupation in half between a region in the sort of southwest called Kherson, and then the other parts in the east. And by doing so, they would also sever Russia's connection by land to the Crimean Peninsula. So tactically, that's the plan. Strategically, that's the plan. And we'll see how close they get to making that a reality.
Yeah, and you talk about this one being just a real hard slog, and that fog of war makes it even harder to figure out if they're gaining inches or miles or what's actually happening there, and that this is going to be a very slow process. I appreciate that you raised the fortifications and the mines. I think this is something that not a lot of people are really thinking about or talking about in terms of how hard it is for Ukraine to move forward against fortified positions. Russia's been able to kind of hunker down and do that. And then the placement of mines. Sometimes we just have this vision that Ukraine's going to come storming through there with the flag flying and Russia will retreat. It's much more complicated than that.
I mean, that's right. If you have whole swaths of territory that are full of minefields, then you have to advance in a quite narrow column, and that also leaves you vulnerable to all sorts of targeting and defensive attacks. So it's going to be a slow attritional battle, and you're also going to see, and so we're seeing now, and the way we're kind of figuring things out is through what various parties and actors post on social media. So we're seeing various pictures on Russian accounts of smoldering Ukrainian vehicles. We're seeing the opposite on Ukrainian accounts. So there's a lot to kind of stitch together from these accounts. And there's also a lot of misinterpretation that you can do about the progress of this campaign. But it is brutal. And what is quite striking, I just had a colleague I was speaking with who came back for a month on the front lines, and they were telling me that, look, the difference between what life is like in Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, which is at this point apparently a city bursting with energy, trendy cafes, nightlife, etc., and the total kind of near-apocalyptic scenes that we see in the east of the country and southeast of the country is quite striking. And we're talking about whole towns destroyed. We're talking about, as you said, swaths of territory covered in mines. They're building a wasteland, and this war is happening in a pretty devastating part. And of course, we saw in the last week with the explosion of this dam along the Dnieper River, massive amounts of flooding as well. So it's all quite a sad and post kind of near-apocalyptic mess.
Yeah, and as you look at that, one of the things that I really appreciated in your piece in the Washington Post today was just creating the context around this counteroffensive. Again, this is going to be slow and a process, but you made the case that this counteroffensive in particular may very well be the thing that dictates the fate of the war in the end. Explain that for us.
Right, because a lot hangs in the balance. Of course, Ukraine is mounting this counteroffensive only because it has a huge amount of Western money and support to put forward these brigades that can get through the Russian lines. And so a success, real tactical gains, would justify the amount of expense that Western governments have put forward. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said as much to my colleagues that, look, we want this to succeed more than anybody else because we need you guys to keep supporting us. And we fear that if this is not a success, if we don't really get anywhere, that there will be mounting pressure, not just from, countries that don't necessarily support Ukraine, but even from Ukraine's closest allies, to perhaps consider other options, to perhaps consider not fighting this war the way it is being fought, to perhaps consider concessions, to perhaps consider negotiations. Yeah. And they don't want that. And at the same time, you're also seeing the Russians are really panicking because if the Ukrainians do succeed, And if they do manage to, say, isolate Crimea or seize a lot of territory back, it just kind of puts the nail in the coffin of what was supposed to be a very easy, quote-unquote, special military campaign by Vladimir Putin. And it's going to be really damaging for Putin's regime.
Yeah, I think that component to it is equally interesting to watch in terms of if Ukraine is able to have success in some of these counteroffensive, it really could mark the beginning of the end of Vladimir Putin and that army being able to be what it once was vaunted to be, and clearly is something far less than that. And then finally, Ishan, before I let you go, what's something kind of under the radar that you're watching in terms of how we're going to tell if Ukraine is actually breaking through in some of those places, or they are getting some momentum as they move through this counteroffensive?
I mean, that's difficult to say because, especially sitting here in Washington, my colleagues in Kyiv have a hard time getting particular access and insight into what's happening on the ground. Forget about me sitting here in Washington. But, I would pay attention to the number of kind of long-range Ukrainian attacks on Russian positions. Think about their capacity with drones, with missile strikes, even perhaps as the offensive goes on with long-range artillery to hit Russian positions beyond the front lines. And I'm thinking about key military positions in parts of occupied Ukraine, key positions, say, in Crimea. And if we see an uptick of that would be a clear sign of the advances that Ukraine is making territorially as well as strategically.
Yeah, important stuff, and we'll keep our eyes tuned in. Again, it's hard to break through that fog of war, but there are some things we'll continue to watch and look as we watch this counteroffensive undulate along. It's a slow, tedious process, but we'll continue to watch that. And Ishan, we appreciate you joining us today. As always, great perspective.
My pleasure, as always.
Again, that's Ishan Tharoor, columnist on the Foreign Desk of the Washington Post. He's the author of today's Worldview newsletter and column, and we're going to continue to watch what's happening in Ukraine. The crucial time, I think, is now. We'll watch it close. Stay with us on Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Right on cue for summer.
OPEC plans to cut oil production.
Gas prices are headed up.
It could drive up prices for other goods.
Whether you're planning a staycation or a day trip, start your summer here. Get updates on traffic out of town, gas prices, and everything you need to know. Listen each day this summer, mornings and afternoons, to KSL News Radio.
Register for breaking news updates by texting the word news to the Cyprus Credit Union KSL text line at 57500.
Are you ready to upgrade your summer vacation? General RV is here to help. This week, you'll get top dollar for your used RV when you trade it in during our Trade Up sales event, June 14th through the 17th. Whether you're looking for a different model or a whole new way to camp, there's never been a better time to trade up. Don't have an RV to trade in? You can still get up to 40% off our huge selection of RVs. Only at General RV in Draper off I-15.
Some things are better together, like burgers and fries, movies and popcorn, and auto and home insurance. At Farm Bureau Financial Services, we'll help you bundle your auto and home coverage in one policy, saving you money. And if a storm hits and both are damaged, you'll pay a single deductible. Find an agent at fbfs.com/protect. It's your future. Let's protect it. Farm Bureau Property and Casualty Insurance Company, Western Agricultural Insurance Company.
With the economy the way it is, you're probably staying put. So invest in your home, your number one asset, with beautiful custom replacement windows from Advanced Window Products. They're a local Utah company building beautiful vinyl framed and insulated double pane windows for 37 years right here in Salt Lake City. Advanced Window Products will save you money on your energy bill. Get security features to keep your family safe. And at Advanced Window Products, it's all custom. And the best part? They're local. They build the windows, they install the windows, and they guarantee them for life. So there's no middleman markup. You save on the highest quality windows in Utah. Plus, Rocky Mountain and Dominion offer rebates. For a limited time, they offer 60-month 0% financing. And right now, get $2,000 off 10 windows or more. They're working 8 weeks out. So make the call now. Advanced Window Products, 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100, or visit AdvancedWindowsUSA.com.
Introducing Yes Heating, Air Conditioning, Plumbing, and Electric. We're bringing all of Utah's favorite HVAC, plumbing, and electrical brands under one roof. Call the pros at Yes and save up to $1,000 on select new energy-efficient HVAC systems. Plus, you get a free whole home air purification system to help reduce harmful airborne contaminants in your home. The same great people providing the same great service that Utah has counted on for more than 45 years. Visit theyesmancan.com to schedule your appointment.
At Social Security, we are always thinking of ways to save you time and make things easier. That's why we created My Social Security. Opening a My Social Security account gives you secure access to your personal record and interactive tools tailored for you. You can see if you are eligible to receive benefits, view spousal benefit estimates, and compare retirement benefit estimates at different ages or dates when you want to start receiving benefits. Already receiving benefits? Use your account to change your address, set up or change direct deposit, get a proof of income letter, and more. In most states, you can also request a replacement Social Security card. Save time. Go online. Open a My Social Security account at ssa.gov/myaccount. Social Security, securing today and tomorrow.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
Victor deployed for the first time to Afghanistan in 2003. At 4 in the morning, my phone rang. They said, "I regret to inform you that your husband was wounded in action." Victor sustained a moderate traumatic brain injury. I was doing school full-time, and I was also then caring for Victor. One of the most important elements of caregiving is taking care of yourself. I just didn't want to forget that I also had goals and that I also had a life. What I did is I challenged Victor to meet me halfway. There are almost 6 million military and veteran caregivers across the nation. We have our own journey, and we can fulfill that journey at the same time that we are helping our loved one.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for a free military veterans guide to navigate your caregiving journey and better care for your loved one and yourself. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Palmas. First, Corey Richens will stay in jail in Summit County. The judge in her case denied bail after a hearing this morning. Second, Utah County authorities say people really need to stay away from the avalanche debris at Bridal Veil Falls. Third, while legislators in Utah and other states have passed laws to ban some books, Illinois has a new law to make the bans themselves illegal. Right now, 70 degrees and mostly cloudy. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today. As always, I am Boyd Matheson. As we round out the program today, I'm always watching for just interesting lessons from surprising places. And we got one over the weekend. The University of Oklahoma women's softball team just finished an extraordinary season. They are once again the national champions in the NCAA, and this is actually their third consecutive national championship. They have a winning streak that goes, I think it's over 60 games. They are incredible players. They just dominated the entire playoff and World Series and the whole year, undefeated as they went through the year. And so as they rounded that out, that is what a dynasty looks like. And these players on the University of Oklahoma's women's softball team just crushed the competition in unprecedented ways in women's softball. So during an interview, there were three of their star players were at the podium taking answers from reporters. And there was one question in particular that was posed by an ESPN reporter. And he was talking about the joy of the game and how hard it is to stay number one. You got a target on your back. Everybody's giving you their best effort. Everybody wants to end the streak or to take the title from you. And how do you make that not be a grind? I thought it was a great question. The response, I think, had a jaw-drop moment for the reporter and for many others, and there's a whole host of lessons in there. So let's start with this exchange with the ESPN reporter and one of those Oklahoma Sooners, Grace Lyons.
For the players, I know you talked about keeping the joy of the game, but I'm curious, it's a long season, right? And you guys have had the target on your back the entire time, the win streak being number one. How do you handle the unique pressure that comes with that? How do you keep the joy for so long when anxiety seems like a thing that could very easily set in?
Well, the only way that you can have a joy that doesn't fade away is from the Lord. And any other type of joy is actually happiness that comes from circumstances and outcomes. I think Coach has said this before, but joy from the Lord is really the only thing that can keep you motivated, just in a good mindset, no matter the outcomes. Thankfully, we've had a lot of success this year, but if it was the other way around, joy from the Lord is the only thing that can keep you embracing those memories, moments, friendships, and all of that. So that's really the only answer to that, because there's no other way that softball can bring you that, because of how much failure comes in it and just how much of a roller coaster the game can be.
So, again, I think the ESPN reporter was absolutely shocked at the response, that it wasn't about some kind of mental toughness or playing one game at a time or all the cliche answers you usually get from athletes these days. But Grace Lyons said, look, this is because of my faith and because I know where to find joy. And we're playing a game where you fail a lot. You strike out. You don't get on base, about 7 out of 10 times. And so there's a lot of ups and downs and all of that. But finding this idea about where the real joy comes from, for her, it came in her faith. So that was interesting. So then they moved to the next player, Jada Coleman, again, part of that championship Oklahoma team, with the same question. Here's her response.
I went through that my freshman year. I was just so happy that we won the College World Series, but I didn't feel joy. I didn't know what to do the next day. I didn't know what to do for that following week. I didn't feel filled, and I had to find Christ in that. And I think that is what makes our team so strong, is that we're not afraid to lose, because if it's not the end of the world if we do lose. Yes, obviously we've worked our butts off to be here and we want to win, but it's not the end of the world because our life is in Christ, and that's all that matters.
So again, that's Jada Coleman from that championship Oklahoma softball team. And I thought that was so stunning that she said her first year at Oklahoma, they won the national championship. And she said she had no joy in that victory, because she had wrapped herself around that end, that outcome only, that was the only path to joy. And so it wasn't until she had pivoted. For her, again, it was faith. For the rest of us, it might be something else. But I thought this was so interesting in terms of these young women, these softball players from Oklahoma, saying, look, we discovered the reason we continue to be successful, we work really hard, and we know where real joy, real happiness, real satisfaction comes from, and it doesn't just come from playing softball. So to round things out, and I'm sure by this point in the program, the ESPN reporter was probably getting a little uncomfortable. He had back-to-back answers that he was not really looking for. And finally, they went to Alyssa Brito, and here's her answer.
I think a huge thing that we've really just latched onto is eyes up. And you guys see us doing this and pointing up, but we're really fixing our eyes on Christ. And that's something where, like they were saying, you can't find a fulfillment in an outcome, whether it's good or bad. And I think that's why we're so steady in what we do, and our love for each other and our love for the game, because we know this game is giving us the opportunity to glorify God. Mm-hmm. And I just think once we figured that out and that was our purpose and everyone was all in with that, it's really changed so much for us. And once I turned to Jesus and I realized how he had changed my outlook on life, not just softball, but understanding how much I have to live for, and that's living to exemplify the kingdom. And I think that brings so much freedom. And I'm sure everyone's story is similar, but we all have those great testimonies that have really shown how awesome it is to play for something bigger.
So those are three extraordinary players and extraordinary humans from the University of Oklahoma women's softball team who just won their third straight national championship, undefeated, totally dominant over all their competition, and yet their perspective is so different. I watch so often, Little League kids that everything is based on an outcome. Whole weekends get ruined because you lose the soccer game or your lacrosse team comes up a little bit short. or maybe it's a dance recital and you don't quite get the victory. And I love this perspective, again, regardless of your faith tradition. This is important for all of us, because if our fulfillment and our joy is based solely on an outcome, that's not a good path. That's not a good model, because you're not going to always win. You won't always get the promotion that you want. You won't always be in the perfect job or the perfect relationship or the perfect community. Life is messy. Life is hard. But when we find joy outside of just the outcomes, whether it's your career, your profession, your schooling, whatever it might be, all of those things are outside of who you are and the things that actually are important. So I think as we look at how we do that, I think the real test is, what do we do next? What do we do next? And to me, it's always about what's next. And I think these young women from the University of Oklahoma laid that out in a pretty compelling way. And again, to the surprise of the ESPN reporter, I think it's pretty obvious that these young ladies had found a higher purpose, not just a higher power. And they recognized what it is that really does matter, that it's not just outcomes, that it's not just winning that matters. It's having that fulfillment, that joy that comes regardless of win or lose. I love the fact that they said that they were working their tails off to win, and they expect to win. They expect to play well. And they're 100% comfortable with losing, because their happiness and their joy was not dependent on an outcome. For these young women, it was a faith in Jesus. It might be something else for you, but the lesson in there is crucial, and that is, don't be so obsessed on the outcome that you lose the joy in the journey. All right, that wraps it up for Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. I am Boyd Matheson. Thanks for being with us today. And as always, as you go out into the world today, make sure you see something that inspires, say something that uplifts, and do something that makes a difference.